Good to see everyone again. I've been trying to make it out here. I know Jim and I have been texting back and forth for a couple months. It seems like every opening there was, we were doing something else or tied up somewhere else. So I'm glad Matt and Randy, I worship with them in Sanger. I'm glad they've been able to fill in. And those are two great guys. Great speakers, very knowledgeable, very loving people. So I'm glad you get to experience what we get to see every week. But it's good to be with you guys. So I think in life we all have kind of pivotal moments. I'll call them pivotal things that kind of determine the path you're on, that change you, make you grow up, especially as a young kid. Going from that 18 to 21-year-old, we all have events in our life that kind of shape us. And I thought this one would be fitting. I know probably 80% of the men in here are veterans. And so for me, my pivotal moment, the thing that made me grow up more than anything, was being in the Marine Corps. That can't help but change you. I missed Ray this morning, my fellow Marine. I know a lot of you guys, Navy and Army and everything else. So I figured this one would be fitting. But I feel like being a Marine really helped me grow as a man, as a Christian especially. It kind of made you determine what I'm going to do for myself, not what my parents are going to make me do or force me to do. But my first job after going through boot camp and what we call Marine combat training was as a mechanic. I was a generator mechanic. Basically working on anything with wires and diesel engines and trying to piece those back together. If you don't know, if you work in the military doesn't usually have the best equipment. It's usually, they say, the lowest bidder, right? Whoever can make that piece of metal for the cheapest price. And you're smiling because you know that's true. So our work was sometimes challenging. It wasn't always maybe the best thought out or the best engineering design. But the point of that, so I was a mechanic, electrician. We weren't the grunts. We weren't the guys on the front lines. We weren't, all of us trained to be riflemen, machine gunners, everything else. But none of us, the guys I was working with, training with, were the grunts. We weren't on the front line. We were mechanics. That was our job, was to support the fight by keeping things powered, by providing electricity. But the first day that my schooling started in North Carolina, the master sergeant in charge of training came in to remind us of the business that we were in. We were wearing camouflage uniforms, right? We weren't mechanics and oil changers at Jiffy Lube. Nothing wrong with Jiffy Lube. But that wasn't the business we were in. We were not in the service industry, right? We were in the military. We existed to fight battles. So he came in just to give us kind of a sobering talk to remind us the business that we were in, what we signed up for. This wasn't going to be easy. It was a change in thinking. For the 5 months prior to that, we've been training hard, but it was mostly just an adrenaline rush. And you guys that were in know a bunch of 18 to 22-year-olds. You give them some guns and some gear and let them run around and fight each other. It gets exciting, but it's mostly adrenaline rush and kind of a blur. It's just a bunch of excitement. It's easy to get distracted or caught up in the moment and lose track of the big picture. And so I think on that first day of training, we needed a reminder. We needed to kind of be brought back into reality. And that's what I hope to do this morning, is to remind us of the business that we're in. I think sometimes it's easy to get caught up in, look, God is gracious and God is good. He is loving. Jesus, he gave us somebody to be a friend, somebody relatable. He gave us God in flesh. And I'm thankful for that. But again, I think it's useful once in a while to remind ourselves that we were born into a world at war. Right? There wouldn't have to be Christians fighting battles if there wasn't somebody to fight against. So I hope that's what I can do this morning, just to remind us of the state that we're in. And I know sometimes I need these reminders just to make sure that I'm actually fighting and not just walking through with my head down. Ephesians 6, 12 through 13 says, "Put on the full armor of God, so that you can take up your stand against the devil's schemes. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil within the heavenly realms." Aside from the Bible, I rarely read a book that doesn't involve plants or soils. I work in farming. That's what I do for a living. I don't read a lot, again, unless it's the Bible or something to do with work. So when I do read a book, I like to get a lot of mileage out of it. I like to use it as long as I possibly can, because it's going to be a while before I get another one. So a while back, I read a book called Waking the Dead by Jon Hubble, and it really stuck with me. I think it has some good points, some things that I need to be reminded of constantly, and so I'll be referring to that throughout the lesson. So have you ever read through the Bible and come upon a verse that seems a little bit dramatic, a little bit intense? For example, Isaiah 45, 2 through 3 says, "I will go before you and level the mountains. I'll break down gates of bronze and cut through bars of iron. I'll give you hidden treasures, riches stored in secret places, so that you may know that I am Lord, the God of Israel, who summons you by name." It just seems extreme, this idea of leveling mountains, cutting through gates of iron and bronze, tearing things down, building things up. But see, as someone who doesn't see our spiritual situation as violent, like we're actually being attacked, a lot of the Bible can seem like metaphor, and some of it is, obviously. But if we see some of these verses through the lens of being in a world at war, they tend to make a lot more sense. And we all know who our enemy is, right? That's not a secret. It's Satan, the devil. So when I read through this book that I was mentioning and started thinking about some of the stuff, the first question I had is, where did Satan come from in the first place? I know we all think of Satan as that trident-carrying pitchfork with, all, of course, a red costume. It's got to be red. With probably some horns. But that's not the case, right? That's not the image that we're given of Satan in the Bible. Ezekiel 28, verses 12 through 9. There's some references, I think, and some of these are again, I think, kind of metaphorical, but they match each other. And so I don't think it's by accident or incorrect. Ezekiel 28, 12 through 9. It says, "You were the seal of perfection, full of wisdom and perfect in beauty. You were in Eden, the garden of God. Every precious stone adorned you: carnelian, chrysolite, emerald, topaz, onyx, and jasper, lapis lazuli, turquoise, and beryl." I don't know what those are, but they're probably beautiful if they're gemstones. "Your settings and mountings were made of gold. On the day you were created, they were prepared. You were anointed as a cherub guardian, for so I ordained you. You were on the holy mountain of God. You walked among the fiery stones. You were blameless in your ways from the day you were created till wickedness was found in you. Through your widespread trade, you were filled with violence, and you sinned. So I drove you in disgrace from the mountain of God, and I expelled you, guardian cherub, from among the fiery stones. Your heart became proud on account of your beauty, and you corrupted your wisdom because of your splendor. So I threw you to the earth. I made a spectacle of you before kings. By your many sins and dishonest trade, you have desecrated your sanctuaries. So I made fire come out of you, and it consumed you, and I reduced you to ashes on the ground in the sight of all who were being watched. All the nations who knew you are appalled at you. You have come to a horrible end and will be no more." That's the Satan. That's the reality. That's who he was. He was beautiful. He was perfect, right? Some scholars, people smarter than I am, say maybe he was even God's personal kind of protector, his personal guardian angel. The highest of angels, made perfect and beautiful, and it even says he was in Eden, right? He was a seal of perfection. You flip over to Revelation 12. I know it's Revelation, so there's some different kind of imagery here. But Revelation 12, 7 through 12 says, "Then war broke out in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought back. But he wasn't strong enough, and they lost their place in heaven. The great dragon was hurled down, the ancient serpent called the devil, or Satan, who leads the whole world astray. He was hurled to the earth, and his angels with him." Then verse 12 says, "Therefore rejoice, you heavens, and you who dwell in them, but woe to the earth and the sea, because the devil has gone down to you. He is filled with fury, because he knows that his time is short." And then verse 17 says, "And the dragon was enraged at the woman and went off to wage war against the rest of her offspring." Listen to this. "Those who keep God's commands and hold fast their testimony about Jesus." In case you missed that, that's us. That's the people serving God here and all around the world. But again, we were born into a world at war. And again, that's the hope I can remind you this morning. This obviously happened, this imagery, before any of us were born. And I get that it's Revelation, so there's some different kind of imagery. But read what it says. It says, "When Satan lost the fight, he was thrown out of heaven, down here to earth, along with his angels." And that's terrifying enough that the devil has angels, people helping him, workers. That means right now, he's walking around here on earth along with all his angels. And again, some more proof of this. Job chapter 1, 6 through 7. And some of these things are kind of crazy to imagine. One day the angels came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came with them. The Lord said to Satan, "Where have you come from?" Satan answered God, "From roaming throughout the earth, going back and forth on it." Right? That's what he's doing. He's wandering around trying to find those who are proclaiming God. 1 Peter 5:8 says, "Be alert and of sober mind. Your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour." We just took our kids up to the Cat Haven. I don't know if you guys have been up there, up in Dunlap, kind of just past Squaw Valley up to 180. It's really a cool place. They've got a bunch of lions and leopards and jaguars. And I mean, those creatures, they were talking about it. They can jump 20 feet high, just standing, to jumping 20 feet. They can jump 20 feet across. They can swim 20 miles in the ocean. They can crush a crocodile's head with its jaws. I mean, those suckers are killing machines. I mean, you can't escape from them. And so you think about that, put the devil in that position. The devil, your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour. He's hungry, right? He's angry. He's looking for somebody to get. Back in verse 17 of Revelation 12, it says that the devil went off to wage war against those who keep God's commands and hold fast to their testimony about Christ. Again, that's us. And that's, I think, sobering. He's looking for you. And it even says what his mood is like. It says there, he is filled with fury because he knows his time is short. If that isn't a sobering thought, you must be asleep. This is an excerpt from one of this book I read. It says, you have an enemy. He is trying to steal your freedom. He's trying to kill your heart. He's trying to destroy your life. Very, very few people live like that. Think about your own life. And again, when I read this, it made me think about the way I live my life, especially as a Christian. The alarm goes off. You hit the snooze button. You catch a few extra winks, gulp down a cup of coffee or a pot of coffee on their way to work. Wonder why there are so many hassles. You grab some lunch, work some more, come home under a sort of cloud, look at the mail, have dinner, watch a little TV, feed the cat, fall into bed, and don't even once wonder how the enemy might be attacking you. Didn't even occur to you. You're just going through the day, just kind of your routine, right? We call it just the routine. Don't even think about how the enemy might be attacking you. All they know is they sure aren't enjoying the abundant life that Christ talked about. We're missing it. I think I'm missing it. I can't speak for everybody, but I know sometimes I miss it. In John 10:10, we're told the thief, aka Satan, comes only, this is his entire purpose. He comes only to steal, kill, and destroy. That's it. That's his entire purpose. So why don't we ever think that the thief is actually trying to steal, kill, and destroy? And again, these are questions I ask myself. There's so much that happens that we just chalk up to having a bad day, or I'm just in a rut lately, or we chalk everything up to God's will. And so again, do you really think it's God's will for us to be miserable? Now, we can go through some tough times. I'm not saying everything's rosy. We can go through tough times, and we've actually promised that we will go through tough times. Maybe physically miserable times, but we can still be joyful through Christ because we have to see the tough times for what they are. God is molding us. He's teaching us. He's training us. Again, we're in a battle here.
Amen.
God is ultimately the most powerful. I believe that 100%. But we can't be naive and think that Satan isn't going to try to use our health, our attitudes, our joy, our positivity, our marriages, our friendships, pandemics. Anything that can be used will be used to turn us. He came to wage war against us to steal, kill, and destroy. And I've got to believe he wants it all. He wants our kids. He wants our marriages. He wants our jobs. He wants our time. He wants our brain space. He wants everything. So again, I hope this is not supposed to be a scary lesson. So what's the good part of this? Thankfully, that's only half of the story. Has anyone been reading through the Bible and came across phrases like Lord Almighty or Lord of Hosts? Anyone that comes across pretty often? I'm sure I've come across that. You've come across that tons of times and never really thought about what that actually means. What it actually means is those terms, Lord Almighty or Lord of Hosts. It means he who is sovereign over all the powers in heaven and on earth. Powers, armies, warriors, angels, whatever that's going to be. He who is sovereign over all the powers in heaven and on earth. It means that God is the God of angel armies and earthly armies. And again, that changes the perspective. The book said it's like comparing Joe as a good man who is in control, right? That's one way of looking at it. And saying Joe is a Navy SEAL, right? Those two things are totally different. You expect different things from them, right? We all are in control at some point in our life. But for some reason, the Navy SEALs, everyone knows Delta Force and all that stuff. Somebody who's in that group, you tend to expect different things out of them. I know I read the Bible a lot, and I think of God as the former. I think of God as a good God who's in control. He knows what's going on. I don't usually look at God as the power or the ruler of angel armies. I don't typically look at him that way. I forget or I gloss over all the fact that God is referred to as a warrior who is clearly fighting for me right now. And if I'm only talking to myself, I apologize that like most speakers, I usually write lessons for myself. I kind of joke, I've got to get through all my issues first before I can start writing lessons for anybody else.
Amen.
But how many of you pay attention to the words and songs that we sing in these books, these song books? Anyone know some of these? The battle belongs to the Lord. You guys know that song? In heaven they are, we're to live. The mighty fortress is our God. Victory in Jesus.
Amen.
Onward Christian soldier.
Amen.
We sing those things. I know some of you guys are getting pumped up. We sing these songs all the time. Our kids sing them, right? I'm in the Lord's army.
Amen.
And we make it out to be like a cute thing with the hand signals, and now they have a cowboy one where they make like chicken signs and a yeehaw and stuff. We're trying to make these songs cute, like being in the Lord's army is a cute thing. Maybe we become oblivious to the fact that we're actually at war, but we still sing these songs. We tell ourselves there is no war and there isn't a present enemy, and our spiritual lives aren't at stake, and we aren't desperately needed in the fight, but we all sign up for God's army, right? In my mind, I tell young people when they get baptized, you just put a target on your back. Just like when you join the military, you are now a target, and people are hunting you down. When you become baptized, when you join God's family, right, when you join God's army, you are now a target.
Man.
You're going to be sought after, but you're also expected to fight. So what are we doing in God's army if there isn't actually a war? I'm going to read two stories real quick. 2 Kings chapter 6, 15 through 17. Some of my favorite stories. 2 Kings chapter 6, verses 15 through 17. And again, just some of the imagery of these stories is if it wasn't inspired by God, I don't know if I believe it, but it's pretty cool. 2 Kings chapter 6, 15 through 17. It says, when the servant of the man of God got up and went out early the next morning, an army with horses and chariots had surrounded the city. Oh no, my lord, what shall we do? The servant asked. Don't be afraid, the prophet answered. Those who are with us are more than those who are with them. And Elisha prayed, open his eyes, God, so he may see. Then the Lord opened the servant's eyes, and he looked and saw the hills full of horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha. And then Daniel chapter 10, verses 7 through 14. Daniel chapter 10, verses 7 through 14. It says, I, Daniel, was the only one who saw the vision. Those who were with me did not see it, but such terror overwhelmed them that they fled and hid themselves. So I was left alone, gazing at this great vision. I had no strength left. My face turned deathly pale, and I was helpless. Then I heard him speaking, and I listened to him. I fell into a deep sleep, my face on the ground. A hand touched me and set me trembling on my hands and knees. Then he said, Daniel, you who are highly esteemed, consider carefully the words I'm about to speak to you, and stand up, for I have now been sent to you. And when he said this to me, I stood up trembling. Then he continued, don't be afraid, Daniel. Since the first day you set your mind to gain understanding and to humble yourself before your God, your words were heard, and I have come in response to them. But the prince of the Persian kingdom resisted me 21 days. Then Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me, because I was detained there with the king of Persia. Now I have come to explain to you that what will happen to your people in the future, for the vision concerns the time yet to come. Now if you missed that, so that story with Daniel, that's an angel speaking to him. Basically he's saying from the first time you asked for understanding, a prayer, I started coming your way. It took him 3 weeks, 21 days to get to him, because he was in a spiritual fight. The prince of Persia being Satan and his angels. That's another word for them. So I read these two stories, one because I think they're really cool. I think the imagery is really interesting. Sometimes I tell my kids these bedtime stories based on the Bible, and they just can't believe that some of these stories are from God. Some of these things are crazy. Way better than I think Hollywood could come up with. But I read those stories to say this. I did this lesson as a scary lesson, and I don't recommend you live in fear. I did this lesson because there's a lot about the Bible that I don't understand. But I am certain that there is more going on than we see, just like Daniel and Elisha's prophet were shown. When Elisha's servant went out, all he saw was the physical, right? He saw the physical armies that were there to capture him. They were surrounded. He didn't see God's armies fighting for him. And I think a lot of times we do the same. We see the physical boundaries, the physical issues in our life, sometimes the people in our life, and we forget all about God, this God of angel armies and God of earthly armies actually fighting for us. And they're there. It's a very real thing. Just because we don't see it doesn't mean it's not there. Living in ignorance or pretending that spiritual warfare doesn't exist could be the most naive and dangerous thing we can do. The book said it's like skipping through the worst part of town late at night, waving your wallet over your head, right? Don't advise you do that. It's like walking into an Al-Qaeda training camp wearing an I Love the U.S. t-shirt. Bad idea. It's like swimming with great white sharks, dressed as a wounded sea lion and smeared with blood. If we deny the battle raging against us, if we ignore the fight, then the thief just gets to steal, kill, and destroy. And I think that's what I'm trying to get across, is sometimes we acknowledge we're Christians, we acknowledge we're part of God's family, but we don't acknowledge there's this fight. And so I think one side of the fight is very aware of what they're doing. Satan's armies are not naive. They know exactly who they're after. They know their time is short. They're furious. They're hungry. Sometimes I don't know that we acknowledge or live like we're in a fight. We don't look for anybody attacking us. We just kind of wander through life. So here's the best news of all. Colossians 2, 13 through 15. Colossians 2:13-15. It says, when you were dead in your sins and in the uncircumcision of your flesh, God made you alive with Christ. He forgave us all our sins, having canceled the charge of our legal indebtedness, which stood against us and condemned us. He took it away and nailed it to the cross. And having disarmed the powers and authorities, he made a public spectacle of them, triumphing over them by the cross. And then in 1 John 4:4, it says, you, dear children, are from God and have overcome them, because the one who is in you is greater than the one who's in the world. Right, that's some powerful stuff. Yeah. And then John 16:33 says, I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace. In this world you will have trouble. Again, there's a promise. You will have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world. He's already beat it, right? The one who's in us is greater than the one who's in the world. He's overcome the world. Have peace. I remember back in 2010, I was in North Carolina for some training. And one night they told us, all the Marines in the barracks, that there was a certain unit that was going to be practicing some night ops. They were going to bring in some helicopters, land on a field about, 300 feet away, right across the street. It was this big football field that we used to work out in and play sports. They would bring out right after dark. So they told us, make sure you're off the field. We don't want anybody getting crushed. Just make sure you're off the field. But it's at this time, so if you guys want to watch, you guys can watch. So for us, it was pretty cool. So we all got out kind of on the balcony. We were on the third deck. Got out on the balcony just to watch. And sure enough, right about the time they said, we started hearing some helicopters coming in. We think there was 2 of them. And you could tell they're getting closer and closer, and then you could tell they stopped moving. And this is a couple hundred feet away. And the only reason we could tell they stopped moving is because the sound didn't change. It just, you could tell they were stationary. We could not see anything. These are helicopters. These are 65 feet, 15 to 20,000 pound pieces of machinery, and you can't see them from 200 feet away. I mean, that's something. And the first thing that went through my mind is, man, I'm glad I'm on their team. I'm glad those guys are with me. I can't imagine being an enemy and hearing these huge pieces of machinery come at you and having no idea where they're coming from. And that's, you think about, terrifying. So I say that to say this: we are on the winning side, right? If we're with Christ. Amen. He's already overcome the world. He's overcome death. He's disarmed the powers and authorities that would try to destroy us. He's already beat it. He's won the war. And because of that, we should not be afraid, but take comfort knowing that he's with us. Romans 8:31, this last verse, says, what then shall we say in response to these things? If God is for us, who can be against us? That's the God that we serve. That's the God that's on my team, or I'm on his team, rather. That's the God of angel armies. That's the God I serve. A God who loves us, who has a plan for us. And again, I hope to remind you this morning, a God that's fighting for you every day. There's things you can't see. There's spiritual forces at work, good and bad, right? But we know that God's the most powerful. He doesn't fight with physical weapons, but with love and truth and the armor of God. That's what I've got for you this morning. I can't fight similar battles for you, but I believe we're family, and we're family especially with the one who can fight your battles. So if you do need prayers, if you do want to be baptized, if you need encouragement, we can set you up with the one who can change your life, who can change your heart, who can fight your battles for you. We can pray with you. We can hug you, encourage you. Whatever you need, this is the chance to come forward. One of your chances to come forward and ask for those prayers and encouragement if that's what you need. Let's sing the song we picked up.
Amen. For 179. God is calling the prodigal, come without delay. Hear